You can't be serious, Robert scoffed, his voice filled with incredulity. This is ridiculous. John was a fugitive, a criminal.
What did you say
and
to
a very
me?
shrewd businessman, Steph countered,
You
her
heard
smile
me.
widening
You're a
into a
liar.
triumphant smirk. He foresaw these eventualities, and he made sure his affairs were in order. So, I'm afraid, dear Robert, that you and Victoria are currently residing in my property. And I intend to take possession of it. Immediately, she snapped her fingers, and suddenly, two burly men, dressed in dark suits, materialized from a black car that had been parked discreetly down the lane. They were cold, efficient, and utterly intimidating. The true extent of John's reach, his insidious planning, was now horrifyingly clear. Even in his absence, his shadow loomed large, manipulated by his equally ruthless sister. Robert and Victoria were trapped, cornered by a new enemy, an enemy with legal backing and chilling determination. The serpent had not only entered the garden, it was now claiming ownership. Meanwhile, Cain, his face a thundercloud of fury and disbelief, confronted Anthony at the Woolpack. The bar, usually a place of jovial camaraderie, was now a silent arena for their volatile confrontation. Anthony, emboldened by his unexpected resurrection and the secret he held over Caleb, met Cain's rage with a chilling composure. "So, you're just going to walk around here, knowing what you did to Caleb, knowing we thought you were dead?" Cain roared, his voice shaking with barely suppressed violence. "You're a coward, Anthony. Just like John." Anthony merely shrugged, a smirk playing on his lips. "I did what I had to do to survive, Cain. John offered me a way out, a new life. Can you blame me for taking it? And as for Caleb, he made his choices. Just like you did." His gaze was cutting, hinting at dark knowledge that went beyond the immediate confrontation. Just then, a distraught Mary rushed into the pub, her face pale with worry. "Aaron's gone," she cried, her voice trembling. "He just vanished from the hospital. The nurses said he seemed agitated after your visit, Cain." Her accusatory gaze fixed on Cain, adding fuel to his already raging fire. Cain felt a fresh wave of guilt wash over him, mixed with a renewed surge of anger at John and his convoluted schemes. Aaron, already so fragile, had been pushed to his breaking point. "He's probably gone to look for John," Chaz whispered, her voice filled with a desperate premonition. "He blames himself for everything. He thinks if he finds John, he can somehow fix it." Cain slammed his fist on the bar, the sound echoing through the stunned silence. "Then we'll find him. Both of them. And John, when I get my hands on him, he'll wish he'd never crawled out of whatever hole he was hiding in." His eyes, usually clouded with suspicion, now blazed with a fierce, protective fire. The pursuit of John had become an all-consuming obsession, a relentless quest for justice and revenge, now intensified by Aaron's reckless disappearance. The hunt was on, and Cain Dingle, driven by love and rage, would stop at nothing to find his son. Dylan, his heart pounding like a drum, found himself alone in the dimly lit factory office. The air was thick with the scent of old paper and stale coffee, a fitting backdrop for his desperate gambit. Stan's words echoed in his mind, a mantra of impending doom and a flicker of desperate hope. He had to find something, anything, that could expose Ray and free him from his clutches. His fingers, trembling slightly, fumbled under Ray's desk blotter, searching for the hidden key. The silence of the office was broken only by the frantic beat of his own heart, and the distant hum of the factory machinery. Finally, his fingers brushed against cold metal. He seized the key, a surge of adrenaline coursing through him, and quickly unlocked Ray's filing cabinet. Inside, amidst a chaotic jumble of invoices and outdated paperwork, he found a ledger, its cover worn, its pages filled with meticulous, handwritten entries. It wasn't just a record of illicit transactions, it was a chilling chronicle of John's dark empire, a meticulous accounting of every stolen drug, every forged document, every coerced delivery. Ray's network, his contacts, the locations of his illicit storage facilities, it was all there, laid bare. As he frantically flipped through the pages, his eyes widened in horror. He saw entries detailing the illegal acquisition of restricted chemicals, chemicals that could be used for far more than just experiments. There were also coded references to a Phase 3, a plan for a major, high-stakes operation that would involve a large shipment of a highly volatile substance. The implications were chilling. John's malevolence wasn't just confined to personal vendettas, he had been involved in something far larger, far more dangerous. Suddenly, the door creaked open, sending a jolt of pure terror through Dylan. He froze, the ledger clutched in his trembling hands, his breath caught in his throat. Ray stood in the doorway, his face devoid of its usual easy charm, replaced by a cold, menacing fury. His eyes, usually calculating, now blazed with a dangerous fire. "Looking for something, Dylan?" he asked, his voice low, deceptively calm, but with an underlying steel that sent a shiver down Dylan's spine. "Or perhaps you were just admiring my Organizational skills? He took a step into the office, his gaze fixed on the ledger in Dylan's hands. Dylan's mind raced, desperate for an escape. He knew he was caught, his desperate gambit exposed. But he also knew that this ledger was his only chance, his only leverage against Trey. He had to act, and he had to act fast. The air crackled with unspoken tension, the silence pregnant with the threat of violence. Dylan, cornered and exposed, was about to face the true cost of his treachery. At the abandoned farmstead, under the oppressive darkness of a moonless night, John meticulously loaded various crates into the back of Ray's battered pickup truck. His face, illuminated by the harsh beam of a single headlamp, was a mosaic of shadows and sharp angles, his eyes gleaming with a manic intensity. He worked with a chilling efficiency, each movement precise, calculated. The crates, though unmarked, had an ominous weight, their contents a sinister mystery. Ray, his face grim, his usually confident demeanor replaced by a nervous agitation, watched John with a mixture of fear and grudging admiration. The confrontation with Dylan had left him shaken, but he understood the precariousness of his position. He was deeply entrenched in John's web, and breaking free was no longer an option. The boy was sniffing around. "John," Ray confessed, his voice low, urgent. "He got into my office. Saw the ledger." John paused, a dark chuckle escaping his lips. "Did he now? A curious little worm. A shame. I had such plans for him." He continued loading the crates, unfazed by Ray's confession, as if Dylan's betrayal was a mere inconvenience. "It seems we need to accelerate our timetable, Ray, before our curious little friend causes too much trouble." "Accelerate?" Ray stammered, his eyes wide with alarm. "But the shipment, the contacts, everything is still in flux. And with Anthony back, and the police crawling all over the village." John turned, his eyes piercing through the darkness, fixing on Ray with an unnerving intensity. "Precisely why we must act, Ray. Chaos, my friend, is merely opportunity in disguise. With Anthony alive, everyone will be distracted, divided. The perfect cover for our grand finale." He gestured to the crates, a triumphant, almost manic grin spreading across his face. "These aren't just stolen drugs, Ray. These are the ingredients for a new kind of liberation. A grand experiment on a scale they could never comprehend." Ray felt a cold dread spread through him. He had always seen John as a means to an end, a source of illicit profits. But now, he was seeing a glimpse of something far more sinister, a chilling madness that went beyond mere criminality. The grand finale, the new kind of liberation, the words echoed with an ominous resonance. Just then, a sleek, black car, its headlights cutting through the darkness like predatory eyes, pulled into the farmstead. Steph emerged from the driver's side, her elegant silhouette a stark contrast to the grim surroundings. Her emerald eyes, cold and calculating, fixed on John, a strange mix of familial recognition and professional assessment. "Brother," Steph said, her voice smooth, betraying no emotion. "You always did have a flair for the dramatic. But I must say, your contingency plan with Anthony was inspired." John smiled, a genuine, albeit unsettling, smile that transformed his gaunt face. "Sister, I knew I could count on you to appreciate the finer points of strategic manipulation. And I trust you've made yourself comfortable in my former abode?" Steph's lips curved into a thin, knowing smile. "Oh, very. Victoria and Robert were most accommodating. They understand the intricacies of property ownership now." She then looked at the crates, her eyes narrowing. "So, this is it then? The culmination of your vision?" John nodded, his eyes gleaming with a manic triumph. "Indeed. A new dawn for Emmerdale, my dear sister. A cleansing fire. And together, we shall usher in a new era. An era of true order." He extended a hand to Steph, a chilling invitation. She took it, their clasped hands an unholy alliance, a fusion of madness and ruthless ambition. Ray, watching the chilling exchange, felt a knot of pure terror tighten in his stomach. He was not just a pawn in John's game, he was now irrevocably bound to a conspiracy far darker and more dangerous than he had ever imagined. The seeds of Emmerdale's destruction were being sown, tended by a brother and sister united in their shared madness. At the Dingle farm, a frantic search for Aaron was underway. Kane, fueled by a potent cocktail of fear and rage, barked orders, his voice raw with desperation. Chaz, her eyes red-rimmed with unshed tears, frantically called every contact she had, her hope dwindling with each unanswered phone. Mary, slumped in a chair, wept silently, fearing the worst for her son. "He could be anywhere," Mary sobbed, her voice thick with despair. "He's so fragile. He could do something reckless." Kane slammed his fist on the table. "He's gone after John. I know it. He thinks if he finds him, he can somehow make sense of all this. He thinks he can get justice for Nate." Just then, the phone rang, a jarring sound in the oppressive silence. Chaz snatched it up, her heart leaping with a desperate hope. It was a distorted voice, almost unrecognizable, but unmistakably Aaron's. "Dad?" Aaron's voice was strained, barely audible, laced with a terrifying desperation. "I found him. He's at the old mill. He's got something big planned. Something terrible." Kane grabbed the phone from Chaz, his face a mask of grim determination. "Aaron, where exactly are you? Are you safe? What's he planning?" But before Aaron could answer, a loud crash, followed by a guttural scream, erupted from the other end of the line. Then, silence. A deafening, chilling silence that spoke of unspeakable horrors. Kane's face went white. "Aaron? Aaron," he roared into the phone, but there was no reply. He looked at Chaz, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. "He's got him. John's got him." A collective gasp of terror swept through the room. Aaron, alone and vulnerable, had walked straight into the lion's den. Kane, fueled by a primal fury, grabbed his keys and raced out the door, his mind fixed on one destination, the old mill. Chaz, Mary, and a few frantic Dingle family members followed close behind, their hearts pounding with a terrifying premonition. The reckoning was coming, a final, violent confrontation between the forces of good and evil, played out in the desolate confines of the old mill, a place where secrets would be unearthed, and fates irrevocably sealed. The stage was set for a terrifying climax, a desperate struggle for survival, and the ultimate price of vengeance. At the old mill, a decaying structure long abandoned, the air was thick with the scent of damp earth and decay, a fitting backdrop for the sinister drama unfolding within. John, his eyes gleaming with a manic triumph, stood over a bound and gagged Aaron, who struggled fruitlessly against his restraints. The crates, now open, revealed their chilling contents, not just stolen medication, but highly volatile chemical compounds, their ominous presence filling the air with a faint, acrid smell. A complex array of wires and timers snaked from the crates, connecting to a makeshift detonator, a chilling testament to John's ultimate, malevolent plan. "You always were so predictable, Aaron," John sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. "Always running into danger, always seeking to be the hero. A fatal flaw, my dear boy." He tapped the detonator with a gloved finger, a chilling smile playing on his lips. "This, Aaron, is my masterpiece. A cleansing fire for Emmerdale. A new beginning, purged of all its imperfections." Aaron, though terrified, glared at John, his eyes burning with defiance. He tried to speak, but the gag muffled his words, a frustrated roar escaping his lips. Suddenly, the silence was shattered by the distant screech of tires and the frantic shouts of approaching voices. Kane, his face contorted with rage, burst into the mill, followed by Chaz, Mary, and the rest of the Dingle family. Their eyes widened in horror at the sight of Aaron, bound and helpless, and the chilling array of explosives. "John," Kane roared, his voice filled with a primal fury. "Let him go. What the hell are you doing?" John merely chuckled, unfazed by their arrival. "Ah, the cavalry arrives. Just in time for the grand finale. Welcome, everyone, to the dawn of a new Emmerdale." He pressed a button on a remote, and a large screen flickered to life, displaying a live feed of various locations across the village: the woolpack, the factory, Victoria's cottage, even the clinic. Each location was marked with a red target symbol. "These, my dear family, are the chosen sites," John announced, his voice booming with a manic theatricality. "The purification points. A complete reset. A new beginning." Kane felt a cold dread spread through him. John wasn't just planning to destroy the mill, he was planning to annihilate Emmerdale. "You're insane," Chaz shrieked, her voice filled with horror. "You're going to kill everyone." John's eyes gleamed with a chilling satisfaction. A necessary sacrifice for a purer world. And to think, it all started with a little misunderstanding. A simple act of vengeance, transformed into a grand vision. He paused, his gaze fixing on Kane. "You see, Kane, Nate wasn't the first. There were others. Failures in my grand design. People who stood in my way, who resisted my guidance. Anthony was merely a convenient one." A gasp of horror swept through the room. The true extent of John's depravity, his long history of manipulation and murder, was finally revealed. Just then, Dylan, his face bruised and battered, stumbled into the mill, clutching Ray's ledger. He had escaped Ray's clutches, but not without a fight. His eyes, wide with terror, fixed on John and the explosives. "He's got a plan, a phase 3, Dylan gasped, his voice hoarse. "He's going to use these chemicals to poison the village's water supply. Not just blow it up, but contaminate it slowly, insidiously. He wants to wipe us out, gradually, silently." A collective wave of nauseated terror swept through the Dingles. Not just an explosion, but a slow, agonizing death, a silent, invisible killer. John's plan was far more insidious, far more malevolent than they had ever imagined. The true scope of his madness, his chilling vision of a purified Emmerdale, was finally unveiled, a horrifying truth that threatened to consume them all. The old mill, once a symbol of neglect, was now a tomb, a ticking time bomb of terror, and the fate of Emmerdale hung precariously in the balance. As Dylan's horrifying revelation echoed through the old mill, a new voice cut through the tension, cold and precise. "Impressive, brother. Truly. But perhaps a little over the top, even for you." Steph emerged from the shadows, her elegant figure a stark contrast to the grim surroundings. She held a sleek, silenced pistol, its barrel glinting ominously in the dim light. Behind her, Ray, his face a mixture of fear and calculated opportunism, cautiously entered, clutching a bag containing the stolen clinic medications and other illicit items. John's eyes, filled with a mixture of surprise and genuine admiration, fixed on his sister. "Steph, my dear, you always did have a knack for timing. And for dramatic entrances." "Indeed," Steph replied, her voice devoid of emotion. "But I fear your theatrical flair has clouded your judgment, John. A complete annihilation? A slow, agonizing poisoning? It's inefficient, messy, and far too personal." Her gaze flickered to the struggling Aaron, then to the terrified Dingles. "My vision for Emmerdale is far more refined. A quiet, systematic takeover. A carefully orchestrated restructuring of power. Not a chaotic bonfire." Kane, seizing the moment of distraction, lunged towards Aaron, attempting to free him. But Ray, quick as a viper, intercepted him, slamming him against a decaying support beam, the sound echoing through the mill. "Stay out of this, Dingle," Ray snarled, his eyes wide with desperate fear. "This is between them." John, a manic grin spreading across his face, raised a hand, stopping Ray. "Let them struggle, Ray. Let them witness the inevitable. And as for you, my dear sister, you misunderstand. This isn't just about power. It's about creation. A tabula rasa. A new beginning, built on the ashes of the old." He gestured to the detonator. "The timer is set. 30 minutes until the grand purification begins." Steph's eyes narrowed, a cold glint in their depths. "No. Your grand purification is a suicide mission, John. It brings too much attention. Too much risk. My plan, however, ensures longevity, control, and absolute anonymity." She raised her pistol, its barrel now pointing directly at John. "I'm here to ensure that your legacy is managed effectively. And that means you, dear brother, are a liability." John stared at her, a flicker of genuine shock crossing his face. "You would betray me, Steph? Your own brother?" "Depths of madness, brother, require firm management," Steph replied, her voice as cold as ice. "And you, John, have descended too far." Suddenly, the mill door burst open again, and Caleb rushed in, his face grim, his eyes fixed on Anthony, who stood beside the Dingles, his face pale with shock. "Anthony," Caleb roared, his voice laced with a mixture of relief and fury. "You're alive. What the hell is going on?" Anthony, his eyes wide with terror, pointed at John. "He made me do it, Caleb. He faked my death. He forced me to be his pawn." The mill was now a volatile cauldron of conflicting agendas, simmering resentments, and desperate gambits. John, the architect of this chaos, was now caught between his sister's ruthless ambition and the vengeful fury of the Dingles. The timer on the detonator continued its relentless count, a silent harbinger of impending doom. The clash of shadows was reaching its terrifying crescendo, and in the heart of the old mill, the fate of Emmerdale hung by the thinnest of threads. As the chaos erupted in the old mill, John, his eyes still gleaming with a manic triumph, raised his hands, a chilling smile playing on his lips. "Let them squabble, sister. Let them rage. It changes nothing. The clock is ticking, and soon, Emmerdale will be reborn." He looked at Aaron, his eyes piercing through the terror in Aaron's gaze. "And you, my dear Aaron, will be the first witness to this unholy sacrament." Suddenly, a shot rang out, echoing through the mill. It wasn't Steph's pistol. It was a guttural roar, followed by a sickening thud. Ray, who had been struggling with Kane, had pulled a hidden knife and, in a moment of desperate panic, plunged it into Kane's side. Kane cried out, collapsing to his knees, clutching his wound, blood seeping through his fingers. "Kane!" Chaz shrieked, rushing to his side, her face contorted with horror. The chaos intensified. Mary screamed, the Dingles cried out in a mixture of fear and rage. Aaron, fueled by a desperate surge of adrenaline, thrashed against his bonds, a guttural roar escaping his gagged mouth. Steph, momentarily distracted by the sudden violence, lowered her pistol slightly. John, ever the opportunist, lunged, grabbing a fallen piece of heavy timber and swinging it wildly, aiming for the detonator. "No, John," Steph cried, realizing his intent. "Don't you dare. That's everything." The timber connected with the detonator with a sickening thud, sending sparks flying. The timer, which had been counting down, began to glitch, its numbers flickering wildly, accelerating, then slowing, then accelerating again. Its erratic behavior a terrifying harbinger of an imminent, unpredictable explosion. John, a triumphant, almost ecstatic grin on his face, looked at Steph. "A different kind of purification, my dear sister. A chaotic rebirth. The ultimate act of creation and destruction." Steph, her face a mask of cold fury, raised her pistol and fired. The bullet struck John in the shoulder, sending him sprawling. But even as he fell, his eyes were fixed on the flickering timer, a manic triumph still etched on his face. Caleb, seeing the imminent danger, and remembering the ledger Dylan held, made a desperate decision. He tackled Dylan, grabbing the ledger from his grasp, his eyes fixed on John. "Tell me, John," Caleb roared, shaking the injured John. "Tell me about Phase 3. The water. How do we stop it? How do we save them?" John, blood streaming from his shoulder, merely chuckled, a raspy, triumphant sound. "Too late, Caleb. The seeds are sown. The poison is already flowing. A silent killer, my friend. A masterpiece of my design." He pointed a trembling finger at the detonator, its numbers now flashing wildly, erratically. "But this is the grand finale. The glorious, chaotic, ultimate ending." The mill began to groan, the decaying timbers creaking under an unseen pressure. Dust rained down from the ceiling, and the ground began to tremble. The chemical compounds in the crates began to react, a faint, ominous hiss emanating from them, mingling with the acrid smell in the air. Ches, tending to a bleeding cane, looked at the flickering timer, then at the terrified faces of her family. "We have to get out of here," she shrieked, her voice filled with a primal fear. "Now!" Aaron, his eyes wide with a terrifying realization, thrashed with renewed urgency, trying to communicate something to Cain, a desperate message, a warning. He managed to loosen his gag, his voice hoarse, barely audible. "The water. The intake pipe. It's a direct feed from the mill to the village." Cain, clutching his bleeding side, his eyes fixed on Aaron, understood. The chemicals weren't just contaminating the mill, they were contaminating the entire village's water supply, a slow, insidious death that would begin even before the explosion. Steph, her face etched with a rare moment of genuine fear, looked at the detonator, then at the collapsing mill, then at John, her brother, his face still twisted in a manic grin of triumph. Her ambition, her cold calculations, suddenly seemed utterly insignificant in the face of such pure, unadulterated madness. The mill groaned again, louder this time, a death rattle. The ground shook violently. The timer on the detonator went completely blank, then flashed a single, terrifying word: imminent. The explosion ripped through the old mill with a deafening roar that shook the very foundations of Emmerdale. A blinding flash of white light illuminated the night sky, followed by a shockwave that sent tremors through the village, rattling windows and awakening terrified residents. A colossal plume of smoke and debris erupted upwards, painting a terrifying mural against the bruised, indifferent sky. Back at Victoria's cottage, the windows shattered inward, sending shards of glass scattering across the living room. Victoria screamed, shielding Harry with her body, a primal fear seizing her. Steph, outside, watching the inferno erupt, felt a grim satisfaction, a cold triumph that mingled with a flicker of something akin to regret. Her brother's grand finale, a chaotic, destructive masterpiece, had finally reached its terrifying crescendo. At the factory, the machinery shuddered, and the lights flickered erratically. Dylan, having narrowly escaped the mill, watched the explosion from a distance, his face etched with a mixture of terror and overwhelming relief. He had survived. But at what cost? At the Dingle farm, the family watched the inferno, their faces pale with shock and grief. Chaz wept openly, clutching a dazed Mary, while other family members clung to each other, their faces a canvas of fear and despair. The fate of Cain and Aaron, caught in the heart of the explosion, remained a terrifying mystery. As the dust settled, and the smoke began to dissipate, a chilling image emerged. The old mill was gone, reduced to a smoldering, gaping crater in the earth. A sinister, reddish glow emanated from the crater, hinting at the dangerous chemical residue that now polluted the soil. And in the distance, a faint, acrid smell began to drift towards the village, carried on the night air, a silent, invisible harbinger of the slow, insidious poisoning that John had orchestrated. The final shot lingered on the crater, then panned towards the village, where a few distant lights began to flicker back on. The silence that followed the explosion was not one of peace, but one of ominous foreboding. Emmerdale, scarred and poisoned, would never be the same. The seeds of destruction had been sown, and the long, agonizing aftermath was just beginning. The ultimate price of John's madness, a silent, invisible killer, was now loose in the heart of the village, and its terrifying effects were yet to be fully revealed. The future of Emmerdale, shrouded in a new kind of darkness, was now hanging by the thinnest of threads, as the true horror of John's legacy slowly, irrevocably, began to unfold.